Hello, time to talk about percents. We've been talking ratios, equivalent ratios. We've put fractions in there because we can write ratios as fractional form. Now we're going to put decimals and percents into the whole thing and show the connection between all of them. So we are family, percent, fraction, and decimal equivalent. We're under your percents tab. So that would be M2-T1 percents. And we're looking for the one that says 1.1%. If you're in the textbook, you're looking for page M2, 109, and let's go. So it says our learning goals here is to write equivalent fractions, decimals, and percents, and model percents as rates per 100 on a 100 grid. So we're still using ratios, we're still using rates. We're just going to make some connections between all of them. You have learned that percents are special types of ratios. How are percents like another type of special ratio, fraction? You know that fractions can be written like decimals, and how are percents like decimals? They're all the same. Part of the same family. We'll talk about these in class, but percents are everywhere. You might see them on a big sale where you have 25% discount. So if something was $100 and 25% discount, you might be able to get it for $75, 25% off. 60% chance of snow, that you might see in the weather forecast, right? Out of 100%, there's over half of a chance that it is going to snow tomorrow, would maybe be what that would show. Star of the basketball team makes 80% of her free throws. So if she was going to shoot 10 free throws, she would be probably most likely guaranteed to make 8 of them, 80% of her free throws. I scored 80% on a 20-question test. Out of all of the questions I got right, I didn't get 100% right. I didn't get every single question right, but out of all of them, I got 80% of them correct. So in that case, 80% out of 100, and it's a 20-question test, and I would divide by 5 here. I would have gotten 15 correct, 16 correct out of my test. Okay, let's keep going. Determining equivalences. 6th grade class is planning a field trip to Philadelphia. To decide which historical site they will visit, 100 6th graders completed a survey. We're going to see all their results in a table, and what we need to fill in on the table, we're going to write ratios using colons. So that would be like 3 to 4. We're going to write fractions like a ratio in lowest terms. We're going to have to simplify them. We're going to write it as a decimal. We're going to shade a grid, and then we're going to see a percent. So we're going to put all these things together. So here's your first statement. It says, which excursion do you want to take in Philadelphia? 35 of the students chose Liberty Bell. So if I write that as a ratio with a colon, I would write 35 to 100, okay? So, because I'm showing how many out of the whole group. If I write that as a fraction, so I can write it like this, 35 out of 100, but I have to simplify that. So I could divide those both by 5, and 35 divided by 5 is 7, 100 divided by 5 is 20, so 7/20. They would also like me to write it like a decimal. So to do that, I go back to this fraction, 35 hundredths, and I just write it as I say it, 35 hundredths. On a grid, this is a grid of 100 squares, so I'm going to fill in 35. I know there's 10 in one column, so 30 would be, I think instead I'll use my highlighter. So 30 would be the first 3 columns, and it's 37. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. Go ahead and do all of those for me, please. Well, you can leave the percents right now and pause the video and go ahead and fill this in for the rest of the chart. Okay, just checking your work to see how you did. The next one, we would end up with 22 to 100 as a fraction. That would look like 11/50ths. As a decimal, we would just say it, 22/100ths. We would fill in 22 of the grid, which would be 2 columns and 2 squares. Let's see, in the next one, we've got 30 to 100 that would like to do that. And 30 over 100 can simplify down to 3 out of 10. I can write 30/100ths, or I can write 3/10ths. Both will work. And then again, 30. To do 30, I'm going to do 3 columns. 13 of the students chose Betsy Ross House, so that's 13 to 100, 13 to 100, and that's already simplified, 13/100ths, and 13 would be 1 whole row and 3. 0 of the students chose the reading terminal market. Poor reading terminal market, so 0 out of 100 for that. You would write 0 to 100. It's not simplified. Simplified would just be 0. You wouldn't write a decimal, it'd just be 0, and you wouldn't color anything in. And then the last one says, are you planning to go on the trip? 100 of the students responded yes. So that's a 100 to 100 ratio. 100 to 100 is the same as 1. So every student is going on the trip. The decimal would just be 1. And 100 out of 100 means I'll color in the whole chart because everybody's going. All right, good job. It says, recall that a percent can be a special part to whole ratio with a whole of 100. You can also think of a percent as a fraction in which the denominator is 100. Percents, fractions, and decimals can be used interchangeably. Okay, you can write 15 out of 100 as a fraction, 15/100ths, or if you simplify it, 3/20ths. You can write 15 out of 100 as a decimal by saying 0 and 15/100ths. And because percent means out of 100, 15 out of 100 can be written as 15%. The percent symbol means per 100 or out of 100. So it says express each ratio in the survey as a percent in the last column. So let's go back and do that. So basically 35/100ths means 35% of the people want to go there. 22 out of 100 means 22%. 30%, 30 out of 100. 13%, 0%, and if everybody wants to go, that's, you guessed it, 100% of the group that would like to go. Write a summary of the results of the student survey using percents. Well, let's see, 100% of the kids voted on where they wanted to go. I wonder, I bet you, if I added all these up and if it's 100% of the kids, that should equal 100. Let's see, 35 and 22 would be 57, plus 30 more would be 87, plus 13, exactly 100%. I can see that the Liberty Bell is the most chosen. I can make some observations about these. I also can tell that number 4 says, look at the percents and decimals that you wrote. Find a pattern and then use this pattern, okay, to show how to go from decimal to percent. So what do we see? Every decimal to percent, decimal to percent, decimal to percent. Every time I see that in a decimal you move the decimal 2 places to the right, and then that gives you the percent. So I'm going to say that use this pattern to describe how to write any percent as a decimal. I would say if I have a percent, I would just move the decimal 2 places to the left if I'm going from percent to decimal. So if I have 85% and I'm going to go to a decimal, I'm going to go 1, 2, and it's going to become 85 hundredths. All right, good. Moving on, it says write each percent as a decimal. Well, if we do that, what we just said, move the decimal 2 places to the right, then I think this one would be 1, 2, 0.80. Go ahead, why don't you try these on your own and try number 6. Pause the video, give them a shot, and then come back. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to practice some of these. Let's see how you did. If I have a decimal right after a 3 and I go 2 places to the left, then it would be 0.03. And I know this because I could also say 3% is like 3 out of 100, 3 hundredths. And this decimal says 3 hundredths. How about this one? 2 places to the left would make it 0.125. 2 places to the left would make it 1.25. All right, pretty easy. All I have to do is move the decimal. It says write each decimal as a percent. Now to go the other direction, I must have to go 2 places to the right. So 1, 2, put a 0 in there. That would be 40%. 1, 2, that would become 7%. 1, 2, that would become 73.81%, because you can have a decimal. And 1, 2 would become 152%. Good. When the denominator is a factor of 100, you can scale up the fraction to write it as a percent. When the denominator is not a factor of 100, you can divide the numerator by the denominator to write it as a decimal and then write it as a percent. Okay, let's try these rates. If I wanted to put it over a percent, that's over 100. Okay, I can tell that all of these I can get to 100 pretty easily. I could take 5 times 20. So then on the top it'd be 4 times 20. So it'd be 80. 80 out of 100 means that it's 80%. All right, go ahead. You try the next couple on your own. All right, in B, you would times by 10 to get to 100. So 3 times 10 is 30, so that would be 30%. And D, I can do 2 times 50 to get to 100. So 3 times 50 is 150, so that's 150%. When I'm looking at this one, I can't think of anything times 8 that would get me to 100. So I must have to do what they tell me up here, and I have to divide it. Okay, I can do that because I remember that the 3 goes in the house, so 3 divided by 8. I can put my decimal there, put my decimal straight up in my answer. 8 can't go into 3, but it can go into 30 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. Subtract and you get 6. I can always add a 0 to bring down. 8 can go into 60 7 times, and 7 times 8 is 56. Subtract and I get 4. Let's bring down one more 0, and 8 can go into 45 times. And finally I get to 0. So my decimal is 0.375, and I know now I can move it 2 places to the right to make it a percent. So it's 37.5%. All right. I think we'll skip that part. So we'll end right there. Thank you guys for working so hard. We'll practice this